UFC 239. Woo! That was crazy. I actually recorded my predictions for the entire main card, and I was going to post them yesterday. What's up guys, Jeremy from All Day MMA here to give you my fight predictions for UFC 239, which thank goodness I didn't, because I was wrong on everyone except one. If you guys follow this channel, you know I've been following MMA religiously basically. I've been addicted to MMA for well over a decade now. I've been watching pretty much every big event over the past 10 years or so. And over that past decade, I've seen almost every single big event, whether it be from back in the day, Pride, WEC, Strike Force, Elite XC, UFC, Bellator, you know, whatever. I've seen almost all of them. UFC 239 last night, without a doubt, was one of the craziest main cards I've ever seen. Like I said, I did record predictions for that fight. I was editing them and I wasn't feeling too hot, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna relax, watch the fights, and I'll upload my predictions for the next card. My predictions were way off. I had, let's see, the first fight of the main card was Michael Chiesa versus Thiago Sanchez. I did pick that one right. My prediction for that one was Michael Chiesa pretty much win a somewhat dominant decision, in which he did. But from that point forward, my predictions were way off. The next fight was Luke Rockhold versus Jan Blachowicz. And my prediction for that fight was basically, I thought Luke Rockhold moving up to 205, I thought that would help his chin a lot. I thought he'd be able to take a shot a lot better. I thought he would get the fight to the ground, and I thought once it hit the ground, he would absolutely dominate Jan. The fight never hit the ground. There was a little bit of weird stuff that happened at the end of the first round with Jan throwing a head kick, and to me it looked like he threw it and it landed after the bell. I believe Herb Dean was the ref for that fight. He said that Jan initiated the kick before the end of the round. That's not how it looked to me. Like I said, it looked like it was a late kick, and it looked like it definitely hurt Luke. It dropped Luke. How much that actually played into the finish that came in the second round, it's tough to say. Overall, honestly, I think Luke Rockhold won this first round, but he didn't look too great. He was fading quite a bit at the end of that first round, and to me, it looked like it was only a matter of time until he was going to get caught with something, dropped, and finished, and that's exactly what happened in round two. Where does Luke Rockhold go from here? That's a good question. I think it's safe to say, based on that fight alone, it didn't look like moving up to 205 is going to help his chin too much. Obviously, going from 185 to 205, if he stays at 205, he's going to be fighting a lot bigger guys in general that throw with a lot more power. And if his chin isn't going to benefit a ton from, you know, a lot smaller weight cut, then I don't think the 205 division is going to be the right one for him. I thought his chin would look a lot better at 205, and if it did, I think that'd be a great weight class for him. I think everyone in general is going to be a little bit slower at 205 than 185, but honestly, from what I saw, Luke didn't look very fast himself. Didn't look like he had much of a speed advantage. He definitely didn't look like he had a power advantage. He just kept spamming the same high kick over and over and over again. And overall, not a very good performance, especially for his debut at 205 pounds. So where he goes from here, I don't know, man. I'd not one to call for fighters to retire, but it looks like at 185 he didn't really have anywhere to go. He kept facing the guys at the top of the division, and you know, he kept getting knocked out. So maybe a rematch with Chris Weidman at 205. I don't know. Maybe he'll you know, retire and move on. He's got a bunch of other things going on in his life, I believe, modeling along with some other things. So maybe he'll take a break and do some submission grappling, because I still hold firm to my belief that he's one of the best submission grapplers in the UFC. I think he might even have the best overall top game in the UFC. But, you know, that doesn't mean much if he can't implement it, if he can't get the takedown. He went for the takedown pretty much the entire first round and was nowhere near successful. I think he dragged Jan to the ground maybe one or two times, but he popped right back up. He didn't even get him all the way to the ground. So if he can't implement his wrestling, if he can't get the takedown, like I said, the top game doesn't really mean too much, and his striking, his speed didn't look too great at 205, and like I said, if there's no huge improvement in his chin from moving up a weight class, then I don't know where he goes from here. It's tough to say. Anyways, moving on to the next fight, which I also predicted wrong, was without a doubt one of, if not the craziest finishes I've ever seen in the UFC. I think you could replay that fight 100 times and there would never be anywhere near a similar outcome to how it actually went down last night, and that was the fight between Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren. Now, it doesn't surprise me necessarily or at all that Jorge Masvidal threw a flying knee to start the fight. I think it was a good approach. There's only a couple ways that could have went. He threw it, it missed, he got taken down. Well, let's be honest, it was only a matter of time before he was going to get taken down by Ben Askren anyway, so I don't think he had too much to lose by throwing that strike. And Ben Askren's not exactly known for his striking or his striking defense. Ben Askren came in kind of careless. He saw, I think, that Jorge, it looked like he knew that Jorge was going to throw some type of flying knee, and he immediately went for the takedown. You know, he saw he was light on his feet, looked like he was about to jump, but man, he just dove right into that flying knee. Perfectly placed, right on the button, and he was out. I don't think I've ever seen a fighter more unconscious than Ben Askren was last night. That was a tough ending to watch. I'm not necessarily a fan of the antics that took place after the fight. Personally, I'm not a big fan of seeing the winning fighter taunt the losing fighter as they lay there unconscious, but maybe that's just me. I don't really think there's a place in MMA for that. I don't like seeing that, but that's a story for a different time and place. The knockout itself, like I said, one of the craziest finishes in UFC history, if not the craziest. I don't really think there's too much other to say about that. It wasn't much of a fight. There was one strike thrown, that one strike landed, and it ended the fight. So, like I said, if those two rematched 100 times in a row, I don't think you'd ever get that same outcome. I think Jorge would definitely win some of those fights, but I would have liked to see the fight play out a little longer myself, so there actually was a bit of a fight. You know, I would have loved to see a finish like that at the beginning of the second round, because then we could have saw the first round, see how those two would have actually competed against each other. While it was an incredible finish, we were robbed of what I thought was going to be a great fight, so that was exciting and disappointing at the same time. The fight after that, another one I predicted wrong. This was my big upset pick for the fight. I thought Holm would have what it takes to dethrone the lioness Amanda Nunes. I was wrong, obviously. Styles make fights. I thought that fight would be very similar to both of Amanda Nunes' fights against Valentina Shevchenko. I think Holm is a similar fighter, although not as talented and not quite as good of a fighter, especially at this stage in her career. Valentina is the younger fighter. I think Valentina is the better fighter, but I think they have similar styles, and like I said, styles make fights. So I thought perhaps Holm would have what it takes to drag her into deep waters, drain Amanda Nunes' gas tank, and win a somewhat lackluster decision after 5 rounds. That's kind of how I saw the fight going. Obviously, it didn't play out that way. Amanda Nunes finished Holm with her own signature head kick, and you know, the rest is history. It was a great finish. It was a great performance. Holm's performance was a little bit strange. Right before she got finished, she looked like she was about to throw maybe a push kick or something, and she hesitated and then didn't throw it, and then she got caught with a head kick. I think that was the second or third time she hesitated about throwing that same kick in the first round, and she pulled back on it like every time. I think Amanda Nunes picked up on that, and she delivered a beautiful head kick counter. So overall, incredible performance by Amanda Nunes. I think she's definitely undisputedly the greatest female fighter of all time. I don't think there's any argument about that. Where does she go from here? I don't know. I don't think there's much competition for her at not only 135 pounds, but there's pretty much no competition at all at 145 pounds, considering there's pretty much no 145-pound female fighters in the UFC. But since she's the champion of both weight classes, I imagine she'll probably want to move up to 145 next, unless the UFC's planning on getting rid of that division. If they aren't, I imagine she'd probably want to move up, defend that title, and you know, see how that plays out. Maybe a rematch against Cyborg. I think that's the only fight that makes sense. I think Cyborg's pretty much the only female fighter in the UFC, aside from Valentina Shevchenko, that has any chance at all of beating Amanda Nunes. So that's a fight I would like to see next. If that doesn't happen, maybe they can talk Valentina into moving up to 135 and having those two fight for a third time. But depending on how you feel about the first two fights, that might be a harder sell than a Cyborg rematch would be, even though personally I think Valentina absolutely won one of those fights, if not both of them. They were extremely close. Not necessarily the most entertaining fights in the world, but I think those two are very evenly matched, and maybe a third one will be a little more entertaining. But aside from those two, either the Cyborg rematch or the Shevchenko rematch, what do you do with Amanda Nunes? She's already ran through every female fighter in the UFC that was ever a champion at 135 or 145, and she's also beat the 125-pound champion twice. So I'm not really sure where she goes from here unless you give her that Cyborg rematch or the Shevchenko rematch. Moving on to the main event. This was one I predicted correctly. I thought Jon Jones would look a little better than he did, and maybe I thought Thiago Santos would look a little worse than he did, but it was a decent fight. Honestly, I thought Thiago Santos did enough to win it. I thought that was probably Jon Jones' least impressive performance of his career. especially considering it looked like Thiago Santos was fighting on one leg or one knee pretty much the majority of that fight. So it was a bit puzzling that Jon Jones only attempted one takedown, because I felt like he had a huge advantage on the ground if and when the fight went there. For whatever reason, it seemed like he was very content to stand and, I want to say, trade with Thiago, but Jon Jones didn't really do much trading. He did a lot of stalking. He didn't really throw any hands though. He threw a lot of kicks. They both kind of tore up each other's legs, and the fight was pretty lackluster overall. But honestly, I thought Thiago Santos did more damage. I thought he edged it out 3 rounds to 2, but at the same time, was that a performance worthy of dethroning a long reigning and perhaps, you know, the greatest champion the UFC's ever seen in Jon Jones? I don't know. It's tough to have a title change hands based on a performance that was that close and also not really that impressive from either guy. But I think if you're judging it unbiased, just based on who did more damage, who edged out the fight, I think you'd have to give it to Thiago Santos. So maybe a rematch is up next for Jon Jones. I don't know. It wasn't not an impressive performance. Overall, it was a very odd performance. Sometimes I think Jon Jones likes to troll and just he enjoys beating opponents at their own game. So maybe he knew Thiago Santos was a striker and he wanted to test himself by seeing if he could defeat him where he's strongest. Tough to say. I don't know where you go from here. I think Thiago Santos absolutely deserves a rematch. I saw a quote from Dana White after the fights last night that said something along the lines of, if you're a judge and you gave that fight to Thiago Santos, you have no business ever judging an MMA fight again. Oh boy. Some of the things that come out of Dana White's mouth, entertaining. We'll stick with entertaining. But obviously he's protecting his cash cow in Jon Jones. That's arguably one of the only major stars he has left in the UFC, you know, with Ronda Rousey retiring and Conor McGregor somewhat retiring. That's arguably the biggest cash cow he has. So obviously he's going to say good things about Jon Jones. Obviously he doesn't want Jon Jones to lose the belt, especially not that way. He's protecting his investment. It makes sense what he said coming from him, but the text of what he said makes no sense at all. That was an extremely close fight. Like I said, if I was a judge, I think Thiago Santos edged it out, and I think there's a lot of people that agree with me, both fans and MMA media. So maybe a rematch is next. If you ask Dana White, I think he said he had no interest at all in a rematch, but I think he's only saying that because he saw what a lot of us saw, that Thiago Santos quite possibly won that fight, and if a rematch happened and Thiago Santos had 2 healthy legs, he very well could win that fight a lot more convincingly. So overall, it was a pretty crazy night of fights. There were some crazy finishes, crazy performances, crazy moments. And before I end this video, I just want to say I think the fighter that I was impressed the most by on last night's card was 21-year-old Chinese fighter Yadong Song. He fought Alejandro Perez and he won that fight via KO in the first round. Like I said, the dude's only 21 years old. He is now 14-3 as a professional. He trains out of Team Alpha Male, and he is fun to watch. So if you haven't seen any of his fights, make sure you tune in for the next one. The dude is fireworks. He's a finisher, and he's a very entertaining fighter. So that is definitely a prospect to keep your eye on going forward. With that said, that is a wrap for the video, guys. Let me know what you thought of UFC 239. Drop your comments down below. What do you think should be next for Jon Jones, Amanda Nunes, Jorge Masvidal, Jan Blachowicz, and Michael Chiesa? Let me know who you want to see them fight next, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.
Oh my goodness! Oh my God! Just like that! That is some serious